Hello lads, ladies, gents, ladettes, whoever, whatever, welcome back to another video. Back in the early 2000s, as the internet became more and more prevalent in the everyday person's home, online games began to absolutely boom in popularity. In this massive flood of MMOs and new games, a small developer, Jagex, created a web-based game known as RuneScape. Initially releasing in 2001, the game has seen itself go through several different iterations as it began to grow in popularity and evolve with the ever-evolving gaming space, with these massive updates eventually leading to RuneScape 2 and 3 respectively. However, these days the series is split into two distinct games: RuneScape, the main continuation of the original development cycle, and the focus of today's video, Old School RuneScape. We are going to touch on the other version of RuneScape next week, so please keep an eye out for that. So why did Jagex decide to have two different versions of what should effectively be the same game? Well, firstly, the game's been out for over 20 years. Secondly, it's due to the fact that Jagex wanted to rewrite the game engine, so it led to the game being split, since a fair amount of players didn't really want to move on to the new mechanics and the new design, much preferring the, very sadly intended pun, old school feel. Now, there is technically an older version of RuneScape that does exist prior to old school RuneScape, with this being called RuneScape Classic, but it is no longer officially supported. It is a neat piece of gaming history, and thankfully there are some fans out there who are still keeping it alive. Being an MMO, you might expect the game to play something like WoW or even Guild Wars. However, in a very surprising twist, booting into old school RuneScape sees you playing a point and click. Basically being completely mouse driven, RuneScape is not a game that is going to find you being overly sweaty and becoming an absolute tryhard in, though I wouldn't be surprised if there are tryhard RuneScape players. It doesn't mean the game's lacking in content for you to enjoy though, as even though most things are relatively hands-off, you'll have a ton of different skills to level here, from cooking, fishing, tree cutting, magic, combat, and many others. There are just tons of things for you to spend your time doing. The core gameplay does technically boil down to you simply clicking on something and waiting for your character to do it. However, that's not for every single skill. It is also very refreshing because the game allows you to be more casual and it's got a much more relaxed approach to its gameplay. And with this approach, it means that RuneScape is playable for pretty much everybody. There's nothing about it that feels overwhelming or overly complex compared to other MMOs. It's definitely a very user-friendly game, and I think it adds to the overall charm. From cutting trees, fishing, and even the fights, RuneScape uses a mix of your level with a dice roll to give you an outcome. It's a perfectly functional system, but it can lead to some things dragging out or taking a little bit longer than you would like, especially in fights. You'll see that blasted blue 0 pop up 5 times in a row and think, how can this be fun? And then all of a sudden you hit a 9 and you're like, holy crap, I'm the greatest fighter that lives. But you might still find yourself asking, how can this be considered fun? Considering, given the fact that the game basically plays itself for the most part, outside of healing, spells, prayers, and maybe changing attack types, but more on that shortly, that the game would end up being pretty boring. And I won't lie, it definitely has its moments where it can get a little tedious, but what makes it special to me boils down to 3 main reasons. Firstly, due to the slower speed of the game, it's extremely accessible, and I know I keep harping on that point, but this game is great because anyone can play. Secondly, the slower pace allows for you to be more social in game, and I'm not someone who's necessarily known to be overly social at the best of times, but I definitely had my fair share of friends that I made on RuneScape back in the day. And finally, the game is extremely straightforward, from the presentation to the mechanics being easy to understand, and even the in-game quests. The quest is probably the first major fault that I think I can find with RuneScape, and that's not because they're bad, they are okay. The writing is definitely not a high point. It's not to the level of WoW where there's some incredible world building going on. It does have its moments for sure, but it's just not quite that top tier level of writing, if you know what I mean. Furthermore, those quests can be a little bit slow, and some of them, if not most of the good ones, are locked behind a paywall of a monthly membership. You don't need this monthly membership to enjoy the game. If you want to have access to everything the game offers, then you do need to sort of have it. I have played with membership and without in the past, and I will say membership does make the experience that little bit better, but at the same time, if I'm going to be paying for a monthly membership, I might just play Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft. To circle back to what I mentioned earlier about combat types, we have 3 different main options here, being melee, ranged, and spells. Now, spells are definitely the most mechanically different, so I'm going to touch on them last out of the 3. Melee is the most straightforward, as you choose between a slash, stab, and defend, each of these leveling up their respective skill. Ranged sees you choosing between accurate, ranged, or rapid fire. Now, depending on what you pick, you'll get different bonuses. So accurate gives you a +3 range boost, rapid is straightforward, and long range allows you to earn defense XP at the same time, meaning you can level up multiple skills at once. Coming around to spells, this is where we need runes, as in the title, RuneScape. You can either make these, buy them, or just find them, and you'll need a specific combination of these different runes in order to cast different spells. So if you can get your hands on them, start hoarding, because you're going to need a lot of these. Now, these days it's definitely easy to get your hands on hundreds, if not thousands of runes compared to what it used to be, at least from my memory. But you're definitely going to want to make sure you have a lot there to level up, because it does take some time, unfortunately. You are going to want to make sure you level up all your skills, because depending on what level they are, it will determine what items you can use. So if you have a low defense stat, odds are you're not going to be able to wear good armor. If you have a low strength stat, you're probably not going to be able to use a good weapon. If you have a low magic level, well, you're probably only going to be able to cast the most basic spells. So make sure you keep this up. It's also important to note there are two ways to measure the level of your character. There is combat level, which is determined by a mathematical algorithm, or the character's total level. So you could be a level 1 combat skill but have 99 in everything else and be an absolute monster at all the other skills. However, you're probably going to get your ass kicked by someone who is combat level 10 but nothing in anything else, which creates a really interesting balance since you can play the game how you see fit. However, it does lead to the one major issue that RuneScape has for pretty much any player, and that is the fact that this game has a hell of a lot of grinding. It's pretty much all everything boils down to. Now, thankfully, most of the skills do work in tandem with one another. However, due to the game's very limited inventory space, it can take a little longer than you would like. It's not as smooth a system as it could be. However, it's not the worst thing either. And I understand, because otherwise you could basically just let your character go wild with fishing until they get to that level. Now, not every skill works in tandem with one another. However, most do have at least a 3 to 4 cycle that works pretty well. For example, fishing works with cooking, which then works with tree cutting, which works with fire making. And this can also help you in combat, leading to all the other combat skills, since you'll probably take damage and need to heal. And the higher level your combat, well, the better gear you can wear. However, if you don't want to buy it, you can probably make it, which means you'll end up going out to level up your smelting, your mining, and your crafting all at once. As you can see, it all works really well together as an overall system. The only issue is, again, going back to the grind. It does take quite some time to get to some of the stupidly high levels. It isn't necessary though, and that's what I think makes RuneScape so good. And that's thanks to the fact that RuneScape, unlike a lot of free-to-play games these days, doesn't demand you log in every single day. It doesn't hit you with ads and constant microtransactions. It lays its cards out there for you to see. It's a very straightforward experience, and it's a very enjoyable one for that. It's a very refreshing game to play. It's the type of game you can hop in and explore and just get lost and have a great time with. There are tons of different locations for you to explore, and even though I wouldn't describe the game as a graphical powerhouse, it's still kind of pleasing to look at because it has a charm to it that I don't think many other games have. And the same thing can go for the OST. It isn't what I would say is particularly great. However, it's charming. There is something about it that just has that special quality that makes you not want to change a damn thing, and I wouldn't. Yeah, they could make it more epic, they could have it be higher quality, but deliberately having it the way it is just makes it the perfect package. If I was to level any other complaints, I would say the fact that some of the more interesting quests and skills are locked behind the membership paywall, but considering it's a free game, it makes sense. Which is why I still consider RuneScape to be one of the best and fairest when it comes to being a free-to-play game. Yes, there are probably better games out there, and yes, there are games with better models when it comes to the monetization, but RuneScape honestly does a fantastic job. They basically nailed it from the beginning, and sure, they've probably made missteps over the years, but where the game sits now is honestly a very playable and very enjoyable experience. If you haven't tried it, give it a go. Runs on pretty much anything. Hell, you can get the game on your phone these days, which is just insane to me. So I'd highly recommend downloading it and just start clicking away. It's honestly way more enjoyable than it has any right to be. So with that, lads, ladies, gents, ladettes, whoever, whatever, it brings us to the end of another video. I hope you enjoyed this look back at old school RuneScape. I had a lot of fun replaying it, and I probably will continue to play it a little bit off and on over the coming months. What's your favorite skill to level up? Mine is probably the lumberjack or the woodcutting or whatever it's called, because I can never remember, but I just enjoy it for some reason. There's something about it that I find very relaxing. Keep your eyes peeled though, because next week we're going to actually be looking at RuneScape 3, or at least the current build of RuneScape, and seeing how the game compares to old school RuneScape. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. If you want to go that extra step, you can hit the subscribe button. If you want to go that extra mile, you can support me on Ko-fi from just $1 a month, like these lovely people here. And with that said, I will see you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. Bye.